Hi, Katiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Happy Monday to you. Hopefully you had a great weekend. This is Let's Talk Tropics, and we got a lot to go over if you've been with us over the last several days or even the last couple of weeks. We've been watching the possibility of a tropical system developing over either the northwestern Gulf of Mexico or possibly over into the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico. Well, this afternoon, we have a new tropical system. It's potential tropical cyclone number 9, and reconnaissance aircraft just arriving in that area to do the investigation. So perhaps later on this afternoon, we'll know if we have indeed a tropical depression or even maybe a tropical storm. So let's get started with the current conditions here in Lafayette. 89 degrees, the current temperature under partly cloudy skies. Feels like 95 though, and I still think that heat index today might climb as high as 100. And with the dew point still running in the low 70s, there could be some widely scattered showers and even a few thunderstorms firing up as we head into the afternoon. And it looks like down here along the coast, couple of spotty showers in Cameron Parish, maybe a little bit trying to pop up there over western portions of Jeff Davis. And then for our inland parishes, we got a few widely scattered showers there between Turkey Creek and Ville Platte, and another one up in Rapides Parish, kind of approaching areas around Alexandria. And some bigger thunderstorms down here over Galveston Bay, and a couple of isolated showers that are trying to fire up here along the Louisiana coast. But the rain chance today is going to be running at about 20%. And skies are pretty much partly cloudy. It's a very summer-like day. I know we're at the very tail end here, getting into the last week of September and heading into October, but I have looked at some of the extended models, and it does seem that things are going to start to get a little more progressive, and maybe going into the early part of August, we'll finally get to feel a good shot of some fall-like air. So pretty skies out there, hot and humid. We've got a front that's draped across the middle part of the country right now, and that is right about there. So that's getting some thunderstorms going across parts of Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. Trough back here, this is what's going to be kind of affecting that front, kind of pushing it into our region by the mid part of the week. And then, of course, you got our potential tropical cyclone 9 down here over the northwestern Caribbean that could cause some problems over the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico here later this week. For our friends who are doing some boating, seas about 1 to 3 feet. They get a little higher, way far offshore, but it does look like it's a pretty decent day over parts of the Gulf of Mexico with a mix of sun and clouds. So anybody boating or working out there this time around, probably enjoying a pretty decent day. Tropical Atlantic satellite, of course, you can see PTC number 9 there in the Caribbean, and then we've got another tropical wave that's out here off the Atlantic coast. We'll talk about this one just in a little bit toward the end of the broadcast here, but we do want to focus more on potential tropical cyclone number 9. That's the X there, and then of course on the right-hand side there, that's that other area that I circled off the African coast that has a pretty good chance for development. And we're going to look a couple of weeks ahead here in just a little bit. But one of the reasons why we're a little more concerned, not just because of the locality of PTC number 9, but the potential with these very, very warm waters that are not just in the Caribbean, but also in the southeastern part of the Gulf of Mexico. So the fuel is there for a system to work with, and the heat potential over the northwest Caribbean, where PTC number 9 is forming right now, is extremely high, and also there over the southeastern part of the Gulf of Mexico, where the future track of this system is forecast to go. So could we see some rapid intensification? There are a couple of models that are going pretty high on the intensity scale with this particular system. Track is pretty much all agreed upon on almost every single global model and even the hurricane models, but our timing is starting to get a little bit a better window of an idea of Thursday night going into Friday, and the intensity models are still kind of way off. But shear, we don't have much shear in the Gulf right now, but where this is trying to develop, there's some moderate shear, and the shear is expected to relax as the system kind of moves a little bit farther toward the north. It might find its way into an area that might have some lower wind shear, but you can see right now, even though this low pressure area that the hurricane reconnaissance aircraft are now starting to investigate. You can see a lot of the blow up of the thunderstorms have been a little bit farther off toward the east. So it may be being impacted by some shear right now, where we think really the low pressure area is a little bit closer to the coast, maybe over here, but you see that blow up of thunderstorms a little bit farther off toward the east. So it is very disorganized right now, but once those recon aircraft are getting the data, we'll be able to get a better idea on whether or not we have a closed center of circulation, which doesn't really appear on the satellite. But again, they're right there inside the storm. It's a lot easier for them to figure out what's going on, kind of like when we watch a football game. You know, we think we see what is going on, but the referee and the instant replay really gives us a better idea. So it is a little bit harder to see what's going on with the satellite, but now that we have aircraft in there investigating, we'll get a much better idea. And it'll also influence the computer models, which surprisingly have been very, very close together, not just today, but really over the weekend. And we didn't really have what we would consider an official system yet. It's still in the development stage. But this is the latest from the National Hurricane Center, having it drift there through the Yucatan Channel. So we do now have hurricane watches and tropical storm warnings up for Cuba and the Yucatan Peninsula as well. So we'll get position updates and intensity updates from the National Hurricane Center now every 3 hours, and we'll get a new cone here every 6. So at 1 o'clock, we'll get another update on whether or not this is a depression or if it's still PTC number 9, but we'll get a position update, so we'll get new lats and longs on there. And then at 4 o'clock, we'll get a whole new cone with all of the new radar, or rather the model data, as well as the reconnaissance data. But looking at the models, what's amazing to me is because this has not actually formed, the models are still trying to grab onto something that technically isn't there. But the fact that all of these lines on the track are so close together in agreement, probably a lot of this has to do with the external features that are going to be guiding this particular system. So the track right now seems to be relatively certain that we're going to see a hurricane passing east of our region, and we won't be affected as much as long as the track stays like this. It looks like the Florida Panhandle and the Florida Peninsula will have more of the effects because of the center and then east of the center where the dirty side of the system would be. Now, we've got these ensemble models, and I share these on social media, but I sometimes don't know if folks truly understand what all of this means. So this is the GF ensemble forecast. So it's the GFS, but it's run over and over and over and over again with just a little bit of a difference in the starting point. They'll change a little bit, maybe pressure or maybe position or just little changes, and then you get a number of different outputs. And this is really the same model running over and over and over again. So you don't need to really pay attention to a line that's to the left or the line that's to the right. You really want to look at that black line that's in the middle, because that's basically the average of what all of the solutions are by running this same model over and over and over again. So you do get a bit of a spread there, which is probably why the hurricane cone is a little bit wider as well. And the JEPS also has this, you have more of the same model running over and over and over again with just a little tweak here and there with the numbers. So again, you've got all the different models, and again, most of these are just focusing on parts of the Florida coastline. And like I said, this is kind of amazing because we don't officially have a tropical depression yet or a tropical storm. So the intensity models have come up. They were way up earlier today, but they seem to have come down just a little bit. And I'm not saying all of them have come down, because you still have a couple of them here that are going Cat 4, and you got a number of them that are going Cat 3, which is a major hurricane. But there were more of these lines approaching the Cat 3 and Cat 4 earlier this morning, but we're still looking at most of these models going solid Cat 1, Cat 2. So virtually all of them, except for a few of them right down here, all of them are in hurricane mode, and only a few of them are there in tropical storm mode. So we do think that this is going to be a hurricane as it approaches the northern Gulf Coast sometime later on. So we're going to run through the global models like we do each and every day on Let's Talk Tropics, but rather than going out 10 days, I'm just going to take this out to Friday morning, which is kind of the forecast period of PTC number 9. And the GFS, you can see, is focusing on the Big Bend area of Florida after moving through the Yucatan Channel and then sliding off toward the northeast. And it's in response to a trough that's going to be digging here and kind of a cutoff low pressure that's going to be over in this area, which should steer it back into southeastern parts of the United States and keep it away from Louisiana. There will also be a surface frontal boundary in between these two as well. So that's part of the thinking, and the Euro model is also very close with the front kind of coming in, and that low, that front that's over Texas right now is what's going to be kind of sliding in and stalling. It's not really going to bring us a whole lot of cool air, maybe a little bit of a cooler, drier air mass, but I will say the stronger the hurricane gets, the more it can pull some of that cooler, drier air down south for us here on the western side of the system. Canadian model, again, almost on top of the other two, so it is pretty rare that you see this kind of an agreement with the big global models here, especially when you're 5 days out. And the RECON is doing the same thing. So really, I think a lot of this has to do with what we're looking at on the outside of this system that would be steering it. And a couple of those things, when you look at the hurricane models here, the only big difference we've got right now is the timing, and the timing isn't a huge range either. We're talking Thursday morning to Friday morning, so they all are kind of focusing in on a 24-hour period, but the intensity models are a little bit more different between model run and model run. So the GFS here has a landfall very similar to what we saw with Hurricane Debbie back in the early part of August. And at landfall here, you can see that the winds up there, it says 80.1 knots, but the GFS actually goes a bit higher on the intensity while it's over the western or the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico. In fact, gets it up to Category 2, Category 3 before landfall. And the Euro model does not seem to be quite as strong as landfall here. It's looking like 45 knots on there, which seems like it's underrepresenting a lot of what the data is out there. So the Euro may come on board with something a little stronger, especially once the RECON data starts to come in. Now, the HWRF is one of the stronger of the hurricane models. And remember, this is a hurricane-specific model, but you can see the winds here at landfall at 95.5 knots. So you're pushing 110. So that is a high-end Category 2, borderline Category 3 hurricane. So we could be talking about a major hurricane, and the HAFS is the one that is pretty much the top of the line when it comes to intensity. Right there, you've got up in the top right-hand corner, you see 125 knots. So that's getting into Category 4 on the scale there. So we could be talking about a major hurricane somewhere there around the Big Bend area. There's not a lot of change in between the four models that I've got here when it comes to location. But if you look, this is Thursday evening for the GFS. The Euro, more Thursday afternoon, while the HWRF and the HAFS model are all more in that Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon. So we're going to be talking about Thursday most likely for something to be moving in east of Tallahassee there, and then as far east as maybe where the Florida Peninsula starts to jut its way southward. So that Big Bend area could be possibly hitting a Category 3 or 4 hurricane here, according to some of those models. So there's the Canadian, just to throw it in for fun so you can compare that with the other ones, and there's the RECON model, and these are all Thursday. So the timing and the track for virtually every model we have is right on top of each other. So the forecast confidence is pretty high on where it's going to go, and really the timing too. Intensity has always been much more difficult to pin down. And there's a lot of different things that are going on in the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico, particularly that tropical cyclone heat potential. So if it hits some of this high TCHP and can tap into some of that very, very warm water. And if you got lower wind shear there, you could see some rapid intensification. We've seen this happen many, many times over the last several years. So the upper level pattern is quite interesting too. And I will say that all of the global models are in agreement with the upper level pattern for the most part. You've got a trough that's going to dig, which will help push our cold front a little bit farther to the east. So we will be on this side of the cold front, which would guide our tropical system back to the northeast over the southeastern part of the U.S. But this low could get cut off. So if it gets cut off, we may see this system kind of curving its way back in. And if that low gets cut off like that, it may slow its forward progression once it gets on land, and then you might be talking about the possibility of a flood threat. Euro also has an upper level low more cut off. The same thing with the Canadian, although it's a little bit farther to the north. And the RECON is just a little bit farther toward the west. But when you're looking at that upper level pattern from GFS to Euro to Canadian and to the RECON, almost all four of them are identical. So right now the confidence is pretty high that we won't be dealing with this tropical system, but our friends to the east over in Florida. And again, depending on how intense the hurricane actually gets, will determine how much of that cooler, drier air will start to slide in here. And that upper low that's there over Arkansas is kind of forecast to meander there for a few days, and then it possibly will be aiding this next trough that's actually way out here. It's off the Pacific. And once that comes in, if this combination is still kind of in this area, once this trough moves over the middle part of the country, it could really start to pull in some cooler and drier air, and maybe we will get our first taste of fall as we start to roll into October. Speaking of October, remember we looked at that the 7-day outlook. Let me see if I can get it back here, the 7-day outlook here, the tropical weather outlook. Remember that we were looking at way off on the eastern part of the Gulf or the Atlantic Ocean? Well, that is really forecast to kind of move out into the middle part of the Atlantic Ocean and kind of turn back to the north. But I wanted to pull up the 6Z. So I don't have the newest data for the GFS for October the 8th. So this is going out 2 weeks. The 12Z is still finishing up, and I don't have the data. But I just wanted to point out something here in 2 weeks, which is really kind of interesting. Is it possible that we could have 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 tropical systems out in the Atlantic or the Gulf of Mexico all at the same time? It's happened before. I know we've had 4 at the same time many times, but is this an indication that October is actually going to be busier than September? And it's something that I've been thinking about with the way our hurricane season has gone this year, where all of the forecasts and all of the data that's out there is pointing at something that should be a very, very busy season, but we haven't seen that materialize quite yet. And I've been kind of wondering throughout the hurricane season, well, since we got such a slow start, does that mean we're going to have more activity in September and October rather than August and September like we normally do? So I'm going to be watching these extended models here. So just remember that as we get into the second half of the hurricane season, it still does remain pretty busy all the way through the mid part of October, even the latter part of October. But here in Louisiana, we pretty much just focus on everything going out to be about October the 15th to the 20th. And then once we get into November, not only does the total activity drop across the Atlantic Basin, but it's really pretty rare that we have anything come close to us here in Louisiana toward the end of October, and especially as we get into November. So don't let your guard down just yet. I know there are a lot of folks that were at stores yesterday kind of picking up a few things. I got a top off for everything. So with this particular hurricane, more and more confidence that this is not going to be affecting us here in Louisiana. I still got plenty of stuff just in case we have to do it again here as we get into October. But let's not write off this one completely yet for us, because we still have to wait for the RECON data to give us a solid idea of exactly where this center of circulation is forming and where it will be. And then, of course, you may see some changes there in our hurricane models over the next 24 hours. But when I get the new update on at 1 o'clock. I will put that up on my social media pages. So if you like this video, please like this and also subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications too. And there are my social media pages on Facebook and X. Additional updates on PTC number 9, or what may become Tropical Depression number 9, will be posted there at 1 o'clock, and then we'll get a full cone coming up at 4 o'clock, and then I'll continue to keep you updated there until I come back tomorrow morning on Acadiana Weather Today here at 7:30. I hope you all have a great day. I'm meteorologist Dave Baker, and I will see you on Tuesday.